was there are all these mysterious statements that kind of, I don't know if I believe there is an overall enlightened individual, because again, it goes to that idolatry idea that I tend to shy away from. But I think there are people who have had incredible moments of enlightenment, and they make statements in that state of enlightenment that resonate in incredible ways, and kind of become bigger sometimes than they should be, because people kind of focus on the object rather than on what's being said. But what it did illuminate were all these moments of enlightenment, I think, that were stated in Christian thought, where there are these disparities between Muslims, Jews, Christians in certain ways. But the idea that it just kind of helped define, in a sense, what the kingdom is from where I stood, while taking out a lot of the religious sort of imagery, and kind of showed the fusion in a lot of these things, like the mustard seed being a kind of a light of truth, which is being sought for in all these different ways. And a lot of those other statements, that what was it? Another one that's part of, and I keep reflecting on this because I've been trying to kind of mend this bridge sometimes in my family where I have differences, but it was the Lord's Prayer that says, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." Sorry, that was the phrase I was looking for. On earth as it is in heaven. So suddenly, and I guess via your film too, I was kind of thinking, well, that's an interesting picture as well. The idea that there is a perfection kind of concept of truth that's unencumbered by oppression and kind of assumption and tradition, that is the reflection of heaven. And what we're striving for is to try and find ways to reach, the true things so that they can be reflected on earth and pulled down from that conceptual space without stuffing a lot of things in that are only going to do more harm. Yeah, it's just like there was a bridge formed. And again, I go back to the way that you create these images and kind of show this idea that, even though people are going about it different ways, it defines what some of these enlightened messages maybe really meant, I guess is what I'm saying. And I thought that was
Yeah.
great.
Cool. Yeah, again, great to hear that. And yeah, absolutely. Bridging the heavens and earth, or the the higher realms of wisdom and pure truth to our human experience is something that is more and more important to me. And in this case, I emblemized it as excuse me, almost a He-Man like antenna of the sword of truth, connecting to this higher aspect, and a human at that point being a pure conduit through purifying themselves of lower intentions and patterns, then being a pure conduit of that higher force of wisdom and love and truth, and having the courage to actually anchor it down into the material plane. And what that means is, what that looks like to me is then reforming one's speech, emotions, and actions, one's deeds, to radiate out into the world, so that presence, that knowing, whenever we're able to access it, emanates out and enriches the realm, right? And helps that kingdom come to fruition. And the kingdom, I see that as an antithesis to, at least in one mode of seeing it, to empire. And the empire is what, I would say, is the earthly managerial, managed cultural construct that is, it's the jurisdiction of the adversarial force. And whether we anthropomorphize that and call it, a certain name, or we just see it as a degenerative, downward pulling death drive within humanity, something that just rebels and defies the higher aspects of being a human. Whatever that is, empire, we're seeing right now these centralized forces, centralized institutions, of whether it's like, they're very destructive the way that I'm seeing them, and they're really spreading out through all of the world. And whether they're destroying what is good, real, honest, true, harmonious, natural, tradition, etc., or they're just stifling growth, innovation, and generally, basically, that destructive tendency is something that I, with the film, am aiming to extricate our hero, and by extension the audience, out of, through not by an act of being saved by an outside force, but an act of inner courage connected to the transcendent. So here there's no real savior. This is just really a call to the heroic impulse.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but it certainly is one way to do it. And it's one way that I feel empowered to portray through this piece, the way that I'm working with my own being. And so yeah, the kingdom out of empire, coming bursting out of empire. And to do so, we have to know how we are participating in empire, how we are not only slaves to it, but culprits and also enablers of it.
Mhm.
And so the more that we see that, and even the privileges that we get from being part of empire, all of us do,
Mhm.
then we can decide whether we want to be part of it, and some of us still do, or
Mhm.
we want to make something greater and better. And it's no easy task. But right now, I feel that in the coming years, the option will be either be subsumed by this greater structure of empire and live on our knees and pretend that we're not, and get whatever safety and privileges we can from that, or we grow beyond what is comfortable, going into what's scary, and creating basically new ways of being in all ways. I mean, even in our film industry, like where the pressure is coming in on all sides. And what I see that as is an evolutionary invitation to basically to grow in a different way. And it's not an easy proposition, but it's also like, like Gandalf said to Frodo, I think, or was it to Bill? I think it was to Frodo. He said, something like, "You didn't choose this time, and you didn't choose this adventure, but here it is, and you have to walk it."
Mhm.
That's just where we are.
It's really interesting and resonates so much with one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of delve into this with so many people, because my heart has always been to find a way to express truth as I come to understand it and see it, or at least collaborating with people to dig for that and express it through story, through this art form of media. And it's because historically too, it's often been used as a distraction. It's got many purposes, I guess, that way. But it's a powerful way to kind of um, share truths. And I do see that because we're in this period of flux where things are really challenged and difficult in the industry. There are those who are trying to prop up the system, and there are also those who are trying to find ways to kind of, I don't know if I would go as far as to say create new systems, but certainly forming new communities around expressing things a bit more freely or uniquely from their own perspective rather than within just that singular frame. And that itself is kind of interesting, because what you're saying about empire, I reflected on that, because one of the struggles I had was, how is it that some people who are brilliant, just incredible, can't see the crumbling of the foundation in these institutions? And I'm not speaking of just one. I mean, you look at it in many contexts, whether it's medically or educationally, politically, they're crumbling. And yet there are some people with brilliant minds who are adamant that to challenge it too much is just kind of, you're in crazy town, or it's ridiculous. But I think one of the things is what you just said, is that for those who it really has worked well for, and maybe not just as an individual, but for generations within family groups or friendship groups, it's a very scary thing to contemplate that there might be something intentionally even corrupt within a system that has really worked well for you, especially if you haven't really participated in the corrupt part, but you've been in good faith kind of succeeding and moving forward in it. And you might see the odd compromise, but ultimately you really don't want that fabric to come down. It's the people who have had to kind of dodge a lot of the bullets in the institutions, I guess, but still kind of survive in it. It gets to a point where it goes beyond the pale for them, and that divide starts to happen. There's those that want to preserve it because it's done everything good for them, and then there are those who can see that it was doing some good, but it's starting to get a bit too compromised. They're starting to kind of, these two groups are kind of pulling away.
Yeah,
Uh,
very
uh,
well said. That's exactly what I'm seeing too. Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. Like you said, it, even generationally, we're used to certain structures and ways of being, ways of functioning in society, and to move out of that or to restructure or innovate in some way feels yeah, feels weird. And unless it's really necessary, which is why points of crisis, which is something we're in and we're entering as well, are the one thing that shakes human beings out of our complacency. We all know it, we all do it. We have to be at a point of crisis to act and change. Very few of us are wise enough or have enough agency and foresight to act before something is actually dire.
mhm,
And so reality and this whole beautiful divine construct is I think is just going to force us to pick sides and go in what I see as in a de-evolutionary path and an evolutionary path. You know, I do give some credence to the path of reincarnation path and the evolution of the soul. So
mhm,
there's something there to be said. And of course, there's no. It's such a strange time, right? We are all various parts of our psyche, which is not fully integrated. We have all these different parts in us, and they are all allied to different aspects of still being in child mode. Others are adults, others are raging lunatics, and there's all these aspects that we're trying to integrate, and like they're all tethered to different systems to various degrees.
yeah,
Someone can be very mistrustful of the banking system, rightfully so, and seeing the enslavement that it entails, yet be really beholden to big medicine because of their own fears of early sickness in their themselves and their family. And there's a certain fear that's there that looks to authorized structures to alleviate that. So it's a
mhm,
great game. It's not, there's no real place to condemn anything unless it's overtly evil or just destructive to humanity. But it's a very interesting game, and I'm observing this restructuring that's occurring. And the main goal of my art is I would like to nudge people to be active participants and co-authors in this restructuring amidst the chaos that's emerging, instead of sleepwalking into it being constructed in an even worse way than it is right now, which is one of the intentions we're seeing. And there's literally trillions of dollars being poured into these directions with technocratic and other control nets.
mhm,
And those of our people, those of our fellows who do benefit from these systems and do want to live with them in them comfortably. And again, I see parts of me that want that and still do it. I don't blame them for wanting to live in these let's say some sort of social credit smart city dystopia in which all of resources are managed, all your behaviors and thoughts and actions and that may are managed. That may sound really stark, dire, and fantastical to some people, but it's I'm it absolutely is not. I can see it. I'm already seeing the people aligning to that pathway, and I don't think it will necessarily happen. It's just that it's a target for a certain number of people,
mhm,
right? And because resources, intentions, and think tanks and all others are aiming in that direction, there's a great momentum.
mhm,
And so one aspect of kingdom is to say um, untether ourselves from that autopilot ride, this narrative, this story that we're being told, which is not inspiring. It's not really, it's not fulfilling. It's kind of lame. There are elements of it are even kind of pathetic to the human spark. It just, it's overall it's lame. And here the idea I'd like to nudge people to basically take authorship of something that is more noble. It doesn't mean it has to be brand new. Like you said, reconstructing systems from the ground up, that's no easy task, and we can't just destroy things and come up with new things. There's this bridging aspect and process of restructuring. It's just that at all points of the journey we have to keep remembering who we are and constantly asking that why we're here and where we're going. What are we part of that's greater than just this egoic personality memory construct, right?
mhm,
And yes, there are certain benefits to that. It's an interesting aspect of being a human to have this personality, but it's beyond the personality is where the real power, fulfillment, and brilliance of our souls comes in. And if we can begin to do the work to go through the discomfort, through the trauma, through this distortions and misperceptions of ourselves and our world, to be courageous enough and humble enough to restructure that and align to the higher impulse that we all have within us, build from there instead of building from fear, restructuring from fear or urgency. If more and more of us do that and shine that light, then I think we will be on the right path.